So thank you everybody for this opportunity to be here and to share the space and to reflect on some of the key elements. And Juan already kind of shared some of those key elements already. But I'll just also elaborate a little bit on the work that we've been doing so far since the Sharm el-Sheikh COP14 to advance the gender considerations in the Global Biodiversity Framework. So I don't know who all are there, but I just also wanted to kind of simplify what we're really talking about today. We always, the first people who are talking to CBD are always talking about acronyms, right? Post-2020, GBF, GPA, etc. So I just wanted to also put a basis on, so what is the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework? It is a global strategic plan for biodiversity being developed under the Convention on Biological Diversity, the CBD, which is one of the Rio Conventions. It is a global agreement that will define global actions to address biodiversity loss for the next decade. And this decade is a very long time, 30 years, with a vision of living in harmony with nature by 2050. This will also replace and much improve on the strategic plan for biodiversity 2011 to 2020 and its 20 ICHA targets. People who are familiar with the CBD will know that before this discussion, there was a plan, and that is a plan that came to the end in 2020, just before the pandemic. And at that time, the COP was supposed to take place in 2020 to guide all the parties for the blueprint for biodiversity. However, so this was, if you look at the logo, it says 2020 UN Biodiversity Conference. This was supposed to take place in 2020, and we are almost 2 years delayed in putting this framework together. Well, you can either look at it as at something plus point or advantage and disadvantages, because it also has given us the opportunity to strengthen elements of gender and human rights, versus also that during the long period of these 2 years, sometimes, at least it has been challenging for some of us, is to keep track of what has been going and how the documents have been developed. So the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework was said to be adopted at COP15, that's called the Conference of the Parties, at its 15th session. And this is still scheduled to take place this year, sometime in Kunming, China, but has been suspended due to the pandemic. Now, this I'll quickly go through. I'm going to put in, I'll go through slides quickly. I do speak fast. So I'll also ask GFC and WCF to let me know on my time track. And I've got 10-15 minutes max. So I'll go through this, what Juana already talked about, the provisions in the Convention on Gender. So of course, Juana talked about the preamble. Preamble is setting the whole stage for the convention, which recognizes the vital roles of women in the implementation of the full of the convention. Besides that, you also had the strategic plan that had requested parties to mainstreaming gender and also called for capacity building on gender mainstreaming to be supported. Now, after this, having this in the preamble, what happened, the discussion on the gender took place in 2008, and in COP12 in Pyeongchang in 2014, the gender plan of action was adopted. This plan, 2015 to 2020 gender plan of action, was a guidance for the implementation of the so-called ICHA targets, strategic plan for biodiversity. Now, also considering that besides the preamble, in the work of the CBD, through different decisions, there has been also the recognition of the vital role of women in different elements of the convention. You may look at the themes of biodiversity and climate change, on ecosystem restoration, and others. So since 2010, until 2010, there are over 60 plus decisions referencing to gender or women within the context of the CBD. Now, if you look at the plan 2, it's 2020. So having said that, one of the key guiding document for the implementation of the post-2020 GBF is also the post-2020 gender plan of action that is also to be adopted at COP15. So I'm just going to give a short synopsis because I'm understanding there might be people who are already familiar with the post-2020. If not, please, I'm happy to take questions. So basically, a snapshot. The post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework came up with the first draft. So this has been gone through the period of 2 years where it took place through the working groups, took place on defining the elements of it. One of the first meetings of the open-ended working group was in Rome, and in February 2020, and when pandemic hit, most of the discussions went virtual online. So in this draft that came up in July 2021, which is called the first draft of the GBF, I just wanted to give you a quick snapshot of these 4 sections in which the GBF is being discussed. You have the first one that has goals, the overall structure in section A to E, which talks about different elements of the GBF. I'll talk more a bit detailed if people want it. Then you have targets 1 to 8 that addresses the threats to biodiversity. Target 9 to 13, talking about meeting people's needs. And then, of course, for the implementation and mainstreaming, target 14 to 21 and 8 to 8, this also includes capacity building, knowledge management, and others. Now, I just highlighted one element there. So in the existing first draft, the GBF was updated for 21 targets. But right now, I'll share some of the advances that we've made, what that target 22 is, and how it came to being. Now, one of the key elements I really wanted to also share with all of you here, also considering, I'm also scoping this webinar to see and get people to join the working groups that we have, to also advise us and be part of this process. So one of the key elements, besides just looking at the framework that will guide the implementation of it, is what's called a monitoring framework. Now, this monitoring framework is basically dealing with indicators. There are 3 levels of indicators: headline indicators, complementary indicators, and component indicators. So these 2 documents will be going hand in hand to ensure the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework. So I just wanted to kind of keep in there the work on indicators and this link to the GBF. Some of the notes I'll keep there that I'll kind of come back to. Just on the reflection that what Juana talked about, looking at these 21 targets that exist currently, there is a lack of gender consideration, gender responsiveness. What the COP had decided in COP14 is lacking, and I'll show this in another slide. And one of the key elements to also note is that through the different processes, the IAG, which is the Interagency and Expert Group on Gender Statistics, IUCN, UN Women, they identified 80 gender relevant indicators. These have got to do with land rights, health, water, and decision making. So there are all these elements, and also to bring to your attention that though we are looking at ensuring that throughout the GBF there is gender considerations embedded, like gender just is considered within the whole framework, one of the key elements to monitor is the indicators. And in the indicator space also, we are lacking having relevant gender specific or gender responsive indicators throughout the Global Biodiversity Framework. So that is just in a very quick synopsis of the discussions that has been taking place in the post-2020. Now, the focus of what the Global Biodiversity, for the Global Biodiversity Framework and the role of the Women's Caucus we've been doing is we have been reviewing the whole process of the working group on 2020, including the SBI, which is a subsidiary body in implementation, and the substar meetings which is on technical and scientific information that is being provided. Now, one of the key core elements I wanted to bring to this webinar are two things, because it's really very vast discussion. Is first, like I talked about, is the post-2020 gender plan of action, which is a very key document for all of us. And then the other one that I mentioned in the previous previous slide was what we refer to as Target 22. So what happened in Geneva? So after having this gap for 2.5 years, we finally met in Geneva in March for 2.5 weeks, which is very intense. You had 3 parallel sessions working on, which saw the SUBSTA meeting, the SBI, and of course the open-ended working group. Now, if you look at the slide, what we really wanted to do after 2.5 years in person was try to really advance, taking the scope that the goals and targets would be discussed in Geneva, is to really push for a campaign for support for a standalone target on gender equality. We have been having this campaign since COP14. We made some advancement, and we have been making these recommendations throughout our various submissions to the CVD, but also in the last meeting in Rome before Geneva, the gender target did make it into the meeting in the plenary. We got party support. However, the document that came out of it did not have that reflected. So looking at that, we were like, okay, we really need to see whether we still have that placement to keep this. And in this photo that you will see is Mexico and Chile. And we gathered support for this. That was a big campaign we ran in Geneva. Now, what happened in Geneva also is the gender plan of action was discussed. It is really it was very interesting that in the initial few days, the agenda item on the gender plan of action kept getting postponed. Finally, when we discussed it, was really very interesting to also, so there was a lot of, I think, gathering of momentum. I would definitely say that it is one of our engagement for the standalone target, because on that campaign, then we also saw a lot of active participation of parties to discuss the gender plan of action. So just looking at that this is a very key document, but also some of the text that got bracketed within the various contact groups and the Friends of the Chair that was organized for the gender plan of action. However, there's also some really key elements that are there in the GPA. This is one of the first GPA, because the initial GPA was very much focused on the work of the Secretariat. But this GPA, the way it is vision is that it will actually enhance or support the national implementation of the GBF. And some of the key elements that still are there going out of Geneva are the protection of women's environmental human rights defenders, dedicated national gender focal point beside others. So this is something that we saw the support of and is in the document. And when I checked the updates on the website today, there isn't an updated document of this, the result out of it. So the latest document that you will still see is the draft gender plan of action that was presented at SBI 3 session, which is, I've given you the list there. And later on, you can also visit those documents for details. I think I've got maybe quick 3 slides. So now what was really very important is that this momentum and where the lack was. So throughout the 21 targets, there is only one target in the current GBF that has got any mention of women and girls, and that is target 21. I will not read it, it's there. And on the side, what we really got the support, which is in the outcome document of the working group, open-ended working group 3 out of Geneva, is we've managed to get a standalone target on gender equality, which is target 22. In the document, it is referred to as a proposed new target. So it has yet to be negotiated, and going forward in Nairobi is where our energy is focused on. However, there is also discussion on how do we really balance target 21 and target 22. Is the mention of women and girls enough in target 21, or would we just be happy with it? Or do we also go forward in strengthening some of the elements, example, land rights, into target 22? However, we also have to be very cautious that currently this target 22 has been proposed by Costa Rica, and we have the whole of GRULAC support on this text. So we have to be also very strategic, and that if we need any changes on this target, are there parties that will support that change? Or how do we really go forward? Because we are also worried that if we change it too dramatically, whether we will lose the existing support that we have. So currently we have 38 parties who have supported this target 22 text as is that I've put in here. And one of the key elements of our work around the GBF and the GPA has been to ensure that there is synergies and links between the two. Now, besides this, I'm just focusing on these two elements, but on the link also you will see that during our various other interventions, the Women's Caucus worked with different allies, have also proposed textual proposals for other targets. The rest of the targets, you can find the link there. So what's next? I'll just going forward from here. So a very crucial milestone for all of us would be the Nairobi meeting in June, which will take place from 21 to the 26th of June. And in your chat, please let me know if you're going, or please reach out. It would be wonderful to see who all will be going, to also see where we could also get your support in drafting elements of the meeting. And then there is going to also be these other two meetings back to back with the Nairobi meeting. One is going to be on item 9 on SBI, which is on reporting, which is a key important document, again, a discussion which is under the SBI, because reporting is one of the key modalities of the convention, which is the NBSAPs, National Biodiversity Strategic and Action Plans, and the 6th National Reports. And then after Nairobi, you also have the important meeting on indicators that will take place in Bonn. So I just wanted to share this, what we did here, just sharing the campaign that we did, party supporting, writing that in our campaign, which was really very good to see. And of course, Chile also promoting on their Twitter account, which was fantastic. So why do we really need a standalone target on gender equality? I won't read this, but also considering that we really need to work on synergies. It's really time that we, as movements, as also members wearing multiple hats of different gender constituencies, women's major group, we really need to come together and see how we could use each other's experiences and knowledge to strengthen our own advocacy work in these different spaces. Because gender responsive is something that is key, talked about in all the Rio conventions, but somehow we tend to still work in silos. And all of these elements do have an impact on each other. Say, for example, right now, the UNCCD is taking place in Côte d'Ivoire, in Abidjan. What will be discussed there could be really very important for how it will affect the CBD negotiations, versus what happened in the CBD will also reflect on the COP following this year, and vice versa. So I'm just going to, we'll go through this. This is what I talked about in a snapshot. We did a side event, and this is the same thing that we presented. And for all of you, this is my last slide. This can be really very complicated, so I'm happy to answer questions, but please go and have a look at the documents. These are really very intense. Like they are, like each of the targets are like, instead of 4 lines, are now 20 lines each with brackets. So this is the official webpage for the discussions on the post-2020 session 4 in Nairobi. And what would be a key document to refer to would be on the report of the Open-Ended Working Group, which has got all the updated discussions on the goals and targets, including target 22. And on the side, you'll also see there is a tab on this one, which talks about gender responsive processes. Unfortunately, it's not updated. So I have asked the Secretariat to update this process so people can easily go and see what's happening under that. And yeah, that's basically it from my side. And key element documents would be, I'll share this link again, is our own report, which is long. So we'll tell you what really needs to be done for the post-2020 recommendation, key strategies that we all could work towards. There's also a human rights working group in the post-2020 that has also been working on this report. This is the third paper. And also the OCHA office is also now engaged, and we're talking about the human rights, the environment, and gender equality. This is the recent report they took out maybe a few months back.
Thanks very much, Tina.
Yeah, and in the end, this is our live session on 22nd May. Please join us. This is where we will also have parties from Tanzania and Dominican Republic talking about Target 22. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Great presentation. Please don't forget to write down your questions in the chat. But if you have some questions now for Tina, please raise your hand. You can just click on the reactions button, the smile face, then a smile up, and then you can raise your hand, and also we will allow you to speak directly your question. Please, while you are writing down your questions, I would like to remind you, especially those people who need interpretation in French and Spanish, please write in the chat also your name, that you need that interpretation, that we can pick up you to organize our breakout groups. Hope that is clear for everybody. Otherwise, we cannot organize properly the breakout groups. Questions for Tina? We will have also an open discussion in the end. So then while you are thinking on your question, I would like to indicate you that our colleague Lucy Mulenki is trying to join this webinar, but it seems that she has some connection problems. And it is pity that we cannot really have Lucy on our board. So in that case, I would like to give the opportunity to Andrea Echeverri. Please, Andrea, the floor is yours. Andrea Echeverri is a colleague of us who work for the Sensat Agua Viva in Colombia. This organization also is a member of the Green Livelihood Alliance. It's a program that is implemented worldwide by six partners organizations. And Andrea, the Sensat Agua Viva is one of the implementers in Colombia from Friends of Earth. So Andrea, welcome. Good morning for you. Yes.
Hola Juana, ¿cómo estás? Well, since I'm in Colombia, I will be talking in Spanish. If I'm talking too fast, you just let me know, because sometimes that happens. Bueno, mi nombre es Andrea Echeverri. Como dijo Juan, efectivamente yo hago parte del área de selvas y biodiversidad de Sensat Agua Viva, Amigos de la Tierra Colombia, una organización que acá en el país lleva cerca de 30 años trabajando por la justicia ambiental, buscando la superación de las brechas que hay entre ecosistemas y culturas y entre distintos grupos humanos, por lo cual nuestra comprensión de la justicia ambiental involucra necesariamente la justicia de género. Nosotras en estos momentos vamos a hablar de unos
Talking
avances.
about some recent progress that we have had at Sensat, specifically referring to what Tina was mentioning previously, which is the implementation of the national plans on biodiversity and other elements of these guidelines, international guidelines. Can you please allow me to share my screen? Yes, Andrea, we're working on that. Yes, Megan has to do that. Megan, please, go ahead. Dice que ya está.
Gracias, ya estoy poniéndola. Bueno,
All
como
right,
les
I'm putting it
indiqué,
on.
nosotros vamos a hablar específicamente de unos avances que hemos planteado desde Sensat que buscan el reconocimiento del manejo comunitario de selvas y territorios en el país a partir de los planes nacionales de biodiversidad y a partir también de otra normativa asociada al manejo comunitario.
And we're also talking about norms associated with communal territorial management.
Entonces, creo que ahí ya deben estar viendo la pantalla.
You should be able to see my screen. And I'm going to highlight some elements that Tina had mentioned before regarding the preamble of the CDB, where it speaks about the traditional dependence of many local communities and indigenous populations that have traditional ways of life based on biological resources. And how these are important for the conservation of biological diversity. And this is in the preamble that Tina was mentioning previously, which is the
what Tina has already
framework
mentioned
prior to 2020, the one that is now finishing.
Framework that is already
And specifically,
and there are some elements that we think that are very useful.
It deals with gender perspectives, and particularly in Article 8J, where it is indicated that there is an arrangement for national legislation to respect, preserve, and maintain the knowledge, innovations, and practices of indigenous and local communities for conservation and the sustainable use of biological diversity.
And promote these principles in the consent, with the consent of the local communities. We want, in order to have the application of this article, we need to
reproducción comunitaria de la vida.
Take into account the local knowledge, the innovations, the practice, and the systems of life, and everything that has been proposed in the IG goals. It's showing us that ecosystem management has been based on local communities. We also understand that when we are talking about indigenous people, we're also talking about communities, about peasants, about campesinos, about Afro people, since Bolivia or Colombia is one of the 14 countries, mega diverse countries. And these are some government. Colombia is the second place
cataloga como el primero. Por ejemplo, en aves,
of biodiversity. It has a number of, for example, the region, the most biodiverse region in the world is in Colombia. Colombia is one of the countries that has more biodiversity for square meter. And we have all the efforts that come from the government, we have to recognize, because that has kept us in the second place and taking care of our biodiversity. Because Colombia, besides being a mega diverse country, is very socio diverse. The indigenous population, according to the last census, is almost 2 million habitats, of whom a little bit more than 50%
Aquí también tenemos una población
are indigenous. Afro-descendants, it's more than 4,600,000, which is the 48, it represents 48.8%. And Colombia has told that this population should be proud, because besides the fact that around the world, people in rural areas are migrating to urban centers, these populations are still living in the 5 ecoregions of Colombia, which makes a very wonderful panorama to save this ecosystem. We have
aquí abajo, reconocen estas instituciones de
also the small farmers, which are almost 12 million and represent, and women are 48%. These are efficacious models to protect the communities, even more than the established, because we believe that 35% of the land is in indigenous territory. It can be in a number of territorial unities that are very particular for Colombia. Other countries that also
la población afro también
have Afro-descent population have also community territories, which they have a number of concessions that make it easy to take conservation measures. Also, small farmers with the titulation of land
fundamentalmente en algunas zonas donde
has been a strategy to stop deforestation. Colombia has been in the place of one of the countries that is losing higher levels of forests. So it's really, really important that we understand that even though we are talking about a very
De todas maneras, hay unas tensiones
that may sound very good and that have recognized biodiversity and have recognized these populations. It is important that they can act as environmental authorities in their territories, and also other mandates, because we know that armed conflicts, for example, has led to the ampliation of extractivism. Nevertheless, and here I enter in the gender scope, in this tension between the territories where extractivism is growing. There's a number of women groups that have reclaimed their role as protectors of the land, with another focus against productivism and extractivism, because women know that they are the takers of their territories. And this has been recognized by the CDB. And I'm not going to stop there because Tina explained it very well. There's a number of injustices based on gender in Colombia that affect rural women, of women that belong to other groups where there are
múltiples violencias que confluyen en los cuerpos,
multiple ways of domination of the bodies of the defenders, and we need to take care of them also. One crucial issue for the women in Colombia, and it's from latest information, is that only in 1991, only 11% of the women were owners of the land. But
pues deben salir nuevamente y no tienen las
after the
garantías
peace
para
process,
a esos territorios y para que
they were able to come back to their territories. So now, what we have done a census, one of the things that we've been moved forward is how we can strengthen this role of women defenders that we are supporting, that is supported by the
analizando con ayuda de un abogado
law in Colombia about the role of women in taking care of biodiversity based on local policies, national policies, and norms related to conservation, to biodiversity, to land, to protected areas. And from those 40 laws, only 2 have a high recognized of women in conservation, and that could benefit the women.
Porque, aparte,
one is the law of, because it's important that they are recognized as owners of the land, because they face a lot of matches within their communities. And only those 2 laws can recognize the role of these women. So that's where we can see how
lo que queremos buscar es decir, bueno,
the setback on policies in Colombia. And that's why we know that these women are facing these colonial regimes. So now we want to strengthen local communities, because colonial conservation should be
de ampliar las áreas protegidas y las figuras de áreas protegidas, por ejemplo, en Colombia.
Should be contrasted with the new framework, which is talking about expanding protected areas, because they they don't recognize local populations, and that has been impacting women, men, and families, because we have seen that families have been separated. So there were kids that were taken away from their mothers, for example. So that's why we are against this kind of patterns, patriarchal patterns that also take force because of the ancestral matches that there is in the communities. And that is being shown in the pressure of conservation measures on how women and men and women and local authorities are the ones that are involving in extractivist contract without consulting the women, restraining their activities. So those are some of the problematics that they are facing, but also with the community, but also with the state. So what we have been doing, we have done a characterization of experiences of community management in five bioregions.
Andrea,
Andrea, to see how the sexual division of work, of labor, has been divided in those communities. We have also seen the positions of Colombia for the CDB, and only the working group for Article 8J. And besides that, we have identified obstacles and opportunities in the Colombian laws in order to have a community management with gender justice. And now we are working on the implementation to do an advocacy route in order to create the conditions and the possibilities to be recognized as forms of territorial care of biodiversity and our fight against deforestation, and to recognize the crucial role of women. So part of the assessments that we have done, in order to summarize all this, we have developed this methodology that in another time I can share it. As final reflections, we see that these frameworks, global frameworks, can be an opportunity when states have not moved forward on their norm, and to identify those gaps and to strengthen what we want to strengthen, and to ratify the needs of care of the territories that do not conflict with local communities, and to fight for a gender justice in order to be recognized the intersectional role of the women in forest conservation that in the framework are recognized, but Colombia has not introduced them in their national plans frameworks. That's why we want to keep on pushing in order to use all this new framework of biodiversity, because we know that the gender focus is crucial for the territory conservation. Thank you, Andrea. I hope that everybody's listening. It's a very interesting presentation. Thank you. We still cannot make Lucy connect.
Andrea's presentation. So we didn't still get Lucy in our board. So, but we know that there is many indigenous people representatives here in this webinar. So I would like to ask Ruth Spencer and Kamal Rai. So I wonder whether one of them could share their perspective on how indigenous people organizations can work together with the Women's Caucus to influence the adoption of the alone stand gender target in the Global Biodiversity Framework. So please, Ruth Spencer or Kamal Rai, the microphone is open for you.
Well, now we have a hand up. So maybe it's a question from Guadalupe. Sorry if I'm butchering the name.
Yeah, Guadalupe, please, could you tell us, this is your questions for Andrea?
Thank you very much. Good morning. I'm going to speak in Spanish. Soy Guadalupe Yesenia, también Hernández, también representante indígena e integrante del Caucus de Mujeres. Y bueno, es un comentario tanto para Andrea como para Tina.
For Andrea and Tina, thank you very much for your presentation. There is a link between the local and the global frameworks and the implementation of local. So I would like to speak about the important role of the women in biodiversity conservation, because we are on the front lines and taking care of the local knowledge and those collective knowledge. And we have two questions or comments about these issues that we think are important to harmonize between women and indigenous groups. We have talked a lot about women's rights, and within our communities, rights are community rights. How are we going to recognize and implement these rights, individual rights, within the collective rights? One can be the participation on assemblies, so decision taking or making, the access,
defendiendo una tierra, las mujeres, que a veces no es nuestra.
The access of land. And also what we would require at local level to do an effective implementation of this framework, because we think that's it's important and urgent, and that it has a gender, and it should have a gender scope. So we want to know what
todo que son esas partes donde tenemos que
these groups are going to be doing in Kenya in the next meeting in order to ensure that this happens. And thank you very much. Thank you, Yesenia, for your question. Who wants to start?
Adelante, Tina.
Sorry, John, did you give me the mic?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, all right. No, Guadalupe, great, interesting discussion. And I think this is really very important, and hopefully I kind of got some elements right. See, regardless of other individual rights or collective rights, just to have a footing in the Global Biodiversity Framework itself, I think is an important task. It is the same thing that you can take an example of the SDGs. You know, one of the key arguments we are seeing in the CBD is why a standalone target on gender? Why isn't 21 enough? The GP is going to guide the implementation. But looking at all the other discussions that are taking place in parallel, so I'll give you a classic example. And I think this is also maybe reflecting on what Ander talked about at the national level. One of the key commitments of the parties is the reporting. the GBF is going to go at the national level. These are the global targets that are going to be transformed into national targets. And that will again depend upon how the country understands those global targets and takes ownership of that. Within that context, it is really very important to recognize their rights, gender justice, women's justice, to the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework in all the elements. Just because there are a lot of the global work that will take national disguise, right? Like planning, you're talking about projects. One of the key elements out there is on mainstreaming. Within the CBD, there's going to be mainstreaming in agriculture, forestry, livestock, energy, mining. Understanding that the importance for Indigenous peoples and collective rights, it's also time for us to really recognize that you also have Indigenous peoples' women's rights, but you also have rural women's rights. You have the fisher folks' rights. You have the farmers' rights. We talk about the UN DRIP. Say, for example, we really haven't also touched upon the relevance of the importance of how do we also bring in these so-called global declarations that the UN drops into the CBD. So I understand that we have to kind of go both ways of really ensure that you have collective rights, but also to ensuring that within our structures, we also ensure that women within our communities are also recognized as decision makers, as knowledge holders. Just having knowledge holders, for my side, I also understand that we're talking about recognizing women as knowledge holders within communities is also recognizing, empowering them to make decisions, to have rights over resources, and to also decide on, say, for example, NBS is going to be very, the ABS is a big discussion, right? Then how do women, because they're talking about women as traditional seed keepers, we're talking about majority of the agricultural data shows the majority of the farming actually goes on women. You know, you have all these complicated discussions, and it is really very important time for us to really look at this intersectional work, but not working in silos. Like I said, it's not only with the convention, with the CBD, but also looking at what's really happening. I mean, all of the other Rio conventions. Yes, the challenge is that these global commitments can be very ambitious, are very ambitious, but you also really need to make sure that they are simplified in the national context. You can take the discussion of Indigenous women's in the CEDAW or the CSW discussions. How do you really transform? They're all talking about land rights, right? I'm talking about lands and resources. In biodiversity, we are talking about not only genetic resources, we're also talking about biological resources. So I think it is a very key element for us to really discuss and really take this forward as a collective. This is, this is not working in silos, but saying that we really need to recognize how we can really ensure the Global Biodiversity Framework is reflective of the diversities of gender, the diversities of women in the world, to strengthen the Global Biodiversity Framework, because the opportunity is now. The Global Biodiversity Framework, I keep telling everybody, it is a 30-year plan. I'm going to be old. The way I look at the GPF, to be honest, is that my daughter is going to be 40, almost 40, when the GBF is going to come live in harmony with nature. Now, do we want to wait that long? She's only 6 right now. That long to again get this gender discussion at that time, or use this opportunity here to strengthen this framework right here, right now. And this is what we really want to see in Nairobi. Otherwise, if it closes, we will lose this opportunity.
Thanks, Tina. Thanks, Tina, for a nice, good reflection and also answer to the questions. And so please, Andrea, do you still have some answer to that question?
Yo me recojo plenamente en lo que acaba de decir Tina y creo que estamos un poco
I want to support what Tina just said. We have to avoid corporative capture of this negotiation, and we have to be aware to do the advocacy
de la biodiversidad, pero sintonizo plenamente.
and see what the role of economic actors are having. And I want to take more time. Thank you. Thank you, Andrea.
I was asking Ruth and Kamal to answer a question. Ruth wrote in the chat that she has some problems to speak because have problems with her microphone. So please, I would like to ask Kamal if you. Kamal is not there. Oh, Kamal is not there. Sorry. So then let's go to our breakout groups. Immediately, we will, Andrea, could you stop with sharing your screen, please? And then please,
¿Yo?
Yeah, stop please with sharing your screen, Andrea, or
Perfecto.
And Chitira,
Yes.
please, would you put the slide, please?
Yes. Do you want me to open the breakout rooms or open the PowerPoint?
First, the slides presentation, because I would like to explain the people that we will work in 4 or 5 groups. Groups will be organized in Spanish speakers, French speakers, and English speakers. We will answer only one question. Each group will have a facilitator and also a reporter. Please, we will share in the chat the links of the Jamboard that you will work in the group. So those are the Jamboard we prepared for each group. So we will put these links in the chat. For English speakers, 2 groups. We organized 2 groups. For Spanish, 2 groups. I don't know, maybe it will be only 1 group. And for French speakers, also 1 group. Please, Chitira of Laura, could you put those links in the chat, and then the breakout groups can work on those. We have 15 minutes for that, so we expect to join again at 4:30. So Chitira, please go on the breakout groups.
Hi, everyone.
And there's a question for you, Juan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which question, Sasha?
From Hannah. If she needs to come back, we wanted her to say something as well, but maybe that's after the breakout.
We hear you poorly, Sasha, but my question is regarding that I was going to present on Women's Major Group. Do you want me to do that after the breakout groups or before?
Yeah, after the breakout groups, after the plenary, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm about to assign you all to different breakout rooms based on the preferred language you have indicated in your names. Those who have not added a preferred language, you will be free to choose which which breakout room you'd like to join. There are 2 breakout rooms for English language speakers and 1 for Spanish and 1 for French. Please let me know if you have any trouble joining any of these rooms or are not able to access them. We will leave you the links to your respective Jamboards inside your breakout rooms. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Hola, Juana. ¿Cómo vas?
Ah, hola Mariana, ¿estás en la reunión?
Ah,
Qué bien que pudiste juntarte al
yeah,
grupo.
ya estoy en un grupo.
Mariana, you're in the meeting. Am I in a group or not?
Kitira, we are already in the breakout groups.
Those who
Is
have not
everybody in the
indicated,
breakup groups?
yeah, those of you who have not indicated which language you'd like to join, you should be getting a message inviting you to choose which breakout room you'd like to join.
Okay.
Hi, Chitra, where would you get the invitation? Okay, there is breakout rooms there. There are 14. Juan, but how long is the breakout room sessions? Like 20 minutes, half an hour?
15 minutes, only 15 minutes.
And then people come back and report or something?
Yes.
Yes.
And then we will have another 10 minutes for report.
Okay, all right. I will, okay, I'm here.
Right, just give us 1 second to post the Jamboard.
Okay, I will be here.
All of you should have received an invitation to join a breakout room of your choice. Please let me know if you have trouble accessing it. I see that the breakout rooms have already started working. There's about 10 of you left to join.
Okay, got it.
Is someone sharing their screen for those who can't open Jamboard?
I can share.
Yeah. Yes, that is that possible?
Yeah. No.
Are you able to share?
No, I'm not a host. No.
I'm not a host either.
Maybe Shiata can do it? Or maybe
But in any case,
yeah.
Or we can put our
Hello, can somebody put me in the translation booth again, please?
Yes, 1 second. You received an invitation to the interpretation room?
Yes, I'm not in the booth anymore. I don't know why. It just kind of like shut down a little and then I was in it again. Buenas, por si acaso no estoy en la, sorry, I'm not in the translation booth, just in case, so when we come back to plenary.
I think they've closed because we've moved into breakout rooms. Once everyone's back in the main room, I will reassign you again if you're not there yet.
Okay, because we still need translation? Because,
Yes, we do.
yeah, they told me it was until 10:30.
Yes, we still will need translation for another half hour.
Half an hour? Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Okay.
Joanne, can you unmute?
Are we supposed to hear anything? I don't hear anything.
Joanne, can you unmute? We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Sorry.
Yes,
I was
yes, sure.
asking Yesenia to present our discussion, the conclusions of the Spanish group. Please, Yesenia, could go on.
Muchas gracias. Hago la presentación en nombre de Andrea y otra compañera que no traigo el nombre ahorita, de Chile.
Johanna.
Johanna, gracias. Bueno, rápidamente lo que vimos para fortalecer ese trabajo es que, en primer lugar, hace falta un conocimiento sobre el convenio, sobre la diversidad biológica, y bueno, sus alcances y las implicaciones y cómo podríamos relacionarnos o cómo habilita o contribuye al ejercicio de nuestros derechos como mujeres. También es importante mantener comunicación más enfocada a los grupos. Bueno, también hablaban ahí de tratar de evitar de hablar en acrónimos, y bueno, explicábamos que es ya un tema como por el uso del tiempo, más allá de otra situación. Otra de las cosas es reconocer cómo el sistema estructural ejerce y actúa para producir discriminación en todas sus formas. Es importante articularnos entre las distintas organizaciones y entablar diálogos entre actores. También actuar juntas como colectividad, intercambiando nuestras experiencias y apoyándonos mutuamente cuando se requiera. Otra de las propuestas es fortalecer nuestras habilidades de incidencia en políticas, tanto a nivel local, nacional y sobre todo internacional, porque en esta diversidad de opiniones y de actores, pues es importante saber cómo llegar con los países, con las partes. Un muy buen ejemplo es lo que se trabajó con el cónclave, el Caucus de mujeres, con la diplomacia del tulipán, de que les dábamos tulipanes a las partes, flores, con el apoyo, etcétera. Y bueno, también las comunidades y las mujeres de todo el mundo pues tienen o tenemos derecho a saber, a conocer ese marco internacional y a decidir cómo involucrarnos, qué hacer con él, si lo usamos como una herramienta para la lucha por nuestros derechos, para la conservación, etcétera. Muchas gracias. No sé si me faltó algo más que mis compañeras quisieran abonar.
Yo creo que está bien. Gracias, Yesenia. Entonces, I would like to ask to the next group, French group, please, could you present your discussions? Oh,
So
this is
there was no French group because in the end there was no need for it. So I was in an English group. Yeah, those are some things we have evoked. The accessibility and inclusivity are big ones. So yeah, making sure that there is a widespread awareness about what is it, what it works, what are the goals. Making sure that minority groups, for example, grassroots movements, are aware of that, and that they know what is expected of them, how they can meaningfully participate. So that these groups can be empowered and take part in it. Also, a point that Annabelle raised was the accessibility. So, for example, the language can be very heavy and difficult if you're not familiar with it. So yeah, again, so that everyone could understand the language, maybe vulgarizing it could help. Yeah, looking into what is the gender responsive approach. So that is a component that includes not only women, but also men, youth, and other minorities. Another point raised was the inclusivity, taking into account the traditional national cultural context. So the fact that in some cultures or countries, women won't have the same access to these forums, or for example, it can be also access to internet, I think. And perhaps using also other international high political forums to inform groups that are not yet involved in the Global Biodiversity Framework, so that they can have those linkages.
Okay. Thanks very much, Laura, for your presentation. Nice ideas and proposals. And then I wonder if there was another English group more.
Yes, so I was asked to present on our group, and we were discussing the gender action plan that's already there and that's being reviewed. We also talked about KPIs and indicators, and then it wouldn't be effective setting up specific indicators for the action plan that's being developed, but it's not good to niche them, but to keep them together with all the other indicators that has been developed. There was a comment that the former gender action plan, or the one that's currently in action, they did an impact analysis, but because it was very what was the word you were using, Tanya? It was very ambitious, maybe, but without too much details. It was very difficult to track how effective it had been. Then there was some talks about joint campaigning, raising awareness of the urgency, but also, first of all, making kind of surveys or check-ins with our networks and people and communities, what would be important for them to identify the perceptions of the people around. And then also making links to SDGs. For example, there's an HLPF this summer coming up that will be reviewing SDG 5 and SDG 15. And that would be an optimal place for us to raise awareness about CBD and the Gender Action Plan. And so that also links to another one, which was about liaising with other feminist networks and kind of doing this information sharing and capacity building on why it would be important. But also I see here linking to human rights, like the and CSW, so linking to other UN forums, basically. Here it says, find new ways of advocacy, since advocacy after online and hybrid meetings has become more difficult, and the echo chambers that we are in has much thicker walls, and it's harder to reach outside of our bubbles. And have I missed something now? Bilateral meetings. Let's see, include men and women and youth, but also businesses, it says, with inputs from many stakeholders to see their feelings, understandings. So basically doing a grand stakeholder mapping and see what they would want. And I think I haven't missed anything, but yeah. Liaising with other international forums, UN forums. And yeah, I missed in short position paper. And campaigning, I think I missed as well. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Hannah, for nice presentation. And also we see how hard the groups has worked. I think what we can catch some ideas from these presentations is some of the key strategies is especially how we can make sure that our language is a bit more comprehensive and also simple language to reach the different actors worldwide, at community levels, at local levels, at government levels, etc., etc. Because sometimes that was also a discussion in many of these groups. We agree on that we need to speak a more simple language, understandable language. Don't use acronyms and avoid to use those acronyms in such a way that these people who are not good informed, they can truly be informed and also participate. And the other important conclusion from this discussion is work together. How we can join and work together, making network, alliance, and putting aside our differences. So sometimes indigenous peoples are working on their own way, and also women groups in their own way, while we are advocating for the same issue, like the race-based approach. So that is nice to hear here. And also that is another issue, that concrete strategy is this, that some of you mentioned, how to also focus our communication strategy, because sometimes we produce many nice materials that reach to the global stakeholders, global actors, but sometimes that is not really, we don't reach the desired results. It's better to focus those message and publications to strategic groups. So to strategize tailored message. So having said that, I would like still to ask some question to Hannah and also to Tanya. Hannah, may you maybe just in short say that we know that women engagement has a lot of experience with advocacy work at different UN processes. Way to talk acronyms. Is there a particular campaign or movement, big or small, that comes to mind which was particularly successful in terms of gender integration and defending women's rights in the international policy process?
Yes, so we have Feminists Want System Change. I will write it in the chat for you. It's a campaign that we developed ahead of the Beijing +25, so the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Platform for Action. And that campaign, Feminists Want System Change, has been it's been taken up by a lot of different feminist groups following UN processes in different forums. So we've seen it in Generation Equality, which was a UN meeting on setting up action coalitions for change. So we saw it there, and we saw it also within the high-level political forum, HLPF, on Agenda 2030. It's also being used during the climate negotiations. It's used during the UN Environmental Assembly, UNEA. And basically what it is that it's a campaign that was to criticize maybe a little bit the UN Women's framing around generation equality. So UN Women's framing was very, we need to bring businesses, we need to do corporate things, we need to, it was maybe not so activist oriented. So we wanted something that had a little bit more language from the movements we're part of. We wanted some more structural analysis than the UN Women was bringing in. So that's where we came up with this framework for Feminist Want System Change. And there are loads of different types of sources for it. Like there's a podcast, there's lots of different campaigns and sub-campaigns within all the regions of the world. And it's been turned into a video that went viral. And yeah, there's just so much content. And what is really impressive with this is that you maybe have been on call, maybe you haven't, where people have these kind of Zoom backgrounds and it says feminism on system change. And I haven't set up those backgrounds. So someone else have just made those for themselves. And it's really nice to see something so organic happen. But what has been most impressive is that we've seen UN agencies starting to use the word system change, you know, and specifically UN Women, they were saying, because we were using this so much, and during 2 days in Geneva, WCF and everyone who was organizing with the civil society day, we made 12 million impressions in 2 days collectively, right? And then after that, referencing our language. So it was a great tool as it really showed that an agency, or a UN agency that is not as progressive as civil society is starting to use our language. It sometimes can get watered down, but you can hold them accountable if they use your language. If they say system change, you can say, well, you said system change, this is what it means, you know? So it's been a great campaign, and it's really nice to see how it's being used all over the world. And it's so many different instances. I mean, that was just one instance for during 2 days, but it's been used through like so many other UN campaigns. So yeah, it's been great. It's really nice.
Thanks very much for such a learning campaign. We can learn something from our Women Caucus campaign. But still, I would like to ask Tanya. Tanya, we know that we are very glad that you could join this webinar. And you are the lead person on gender issues for the Secretariat of the Convention on Biodiversity. So please, would you like willing to share some of your perspective on how we can ensure the entire global biodiversity framework becoming as gender just and gender transformative?
Okay, thank you very much. I guess we were just talking about this in the breakout session, and I don't know that I have too many more ideas to add to what has been raised in the discussion. But I think one of the things that I said that I can share again here is just around trying to make the links with the SDGs and Agenda 2030. They have, I think, really set a precedent. Precedent has been set in the agenda and the SDGs in showing how gender and women's empowerment can be really well reflected as a central cross-cutting component. So there is an opportunity, I think, within the GBF to make that argument, to use that as a business case for saying, like, the GBF needs to correspond with the SDGs to support the implementation of the SDGs, and it is only stronger in doing so with a gender lens applied, and that really to support the SDGs it needs a gender lens. So I think there's a case to be made in those terms that potentially could help get some more support from parties and others. And I do think it's also coming down to like giving some very concrete proposals and trying to find ways in which the language can at least be, nuanced or somehow, because I think there's a lot of pushback and trying to avoid having very long statements for targets and for goals. So that's one of the limitations around putting in additional gender language, and that's one of the sort of reasons that there's some pushback, I think. But one of the suggestions I heard recently in a discussion was about, again, following the model of the SDGs, where there's sort of a headline title for a goal or a target, and then there's more description that follows. So I mean, that was just a consideration in how to frame these and how to communicate the GBF. So maybe with that kind of approach, it gives some more scope to including gender language in the targets or the goals themselves. But I would just say, drawing on the example of the SDGs is a good opportunity and an important case to make.
Yeah, thanks very much, Tanya. for such a nice, good and grateful insights. And lastly, but I would like still give an opportunity to hear to Hapahkonde. Hapahkonde, I think you are a representative from an indigenous people organization. I was wondering if you can share with us some ideas how indigenous peoples organizations can work together with the Women's Caucus to influence the adoption of the alone stand gender target in the Global Biodiversity Framework. We would like to hear you, Hapahkonde, also the voice from a male here. Hapahkonde, do you think that you can still share some of your point of views? It seems that Hapahkonde cannot share the video camera. That's why he cannot. But yeah, please, Hapahkonde, could you unmute your microphone and also open your camera? Okay. And okay, your microphone. It's pity that we cannot hear you. It seems you have some limitations here. Anyhow, yeah, you can always speak Hapahkonde in Spanish. So. Okay, then we reach already the time. So thanks very much to all of you for your participation, for your great ideas and insights. And we have saved this, we have recorded this presentation. Only one last question, please. Could you put on your video for the last picture of this presentation? Please, Chitira, could you take maybe a picture? All of you, please put on your camera, your video camera.
Joanna, can I say something before the photo?
Yeah, of course, of course.
I'm sorry for taking the space, but I can't help it. So first, thanks for GFC and WCF for organizing this webinar. We'd also organized 2 earlier ones for the Women Caucus members, and it's really great to see the momentum for the interest. And I just looked at all the Jamboard comments, and these are really aligned to some of the work that we're already carrying out. So please join. Please, I already know that some of you or most of you are already members of Women's Major Group, Women's Gender Constituency, including for the Women's Caucus, or some of you are all in 3 or 4 caucuses in different international spaces. So this is an opportunity for us to kind of come together. And if you're not already a member of the Women's Caucus and are interested to follow this through going forward, we're also looking for your expertise. Like I said, compared to the other caucuses, we are comparatively very small and not funding. So any help, any expertise, any knowledge that you would be able to contribute is more than welcome. Absolutely. So please reach out to me if you can't find the link, but please join the caucus to really also support the discussion going forward. But not only keep it until here. So hopefully I will be getting all of you enlisted and also identifying who would be able to take which task force forward for the post-2020 to make sure that it's gender transformative and gender just. So I just wanted to leave at that, saying please join the Women's Caucus mailing list. Yes, thank you, Joanna.
Thank you, Mina. So finally, please put your camera on for the picture. Mariana, Sharon, Irene, Agne, Claire, please activate your camera just for a second. Then we can take a picture of all of you.
Looks like everyone's
Yeah.
turn the camera on. So
Mariana,
shall we say
Sharon.
biodiversity on 3?
Okay.
1, 2, 3. Biodiversity.
Bye-bye. So till the next meeting, and have a nice day or evening or whatever where you are. Thanks very much to everybody.
Thanks all. Gracias. Merci.
Thanks. Gracias. Nos vemos.
Bye, thank you.